Thank you so much, and thank you for your work with March of Dimes. You stay in touch with a lot of us with committee on a lot of issues, so thank you very much for your work. Ms. Schilling?
Yes, good morning. My name is Ellie Schilling. I'm a Louisiana attorney who represents reproductive health care providers and other health care providers. And I'd like to start by addressing the amendment and some of the legal problems that I think still exist in the bill. Specifically, then, I think there's a lot of Fourth Amendment problems here, particularly in the context of public hospitals. Even though the bill would not now require mandatory blood testing, it is allowing that testing to be done without consent and without probable cause. So taking someone's blood is a search, like by definition, under the Fourth Amendment, and it could be done, if this were the law, without any patient consent and without any probable cause. So that's a significant Fourth Amendment problem. There's also some potential other equal protection problems in terms of that this is only going to obviously be used with women and pregnant people. That's the sort of the baseline for what screening is. There's no suggestion that, fathers should maybe be screened for potential, drug use and maybe parenting problems that they might have when they're at the hospital. And then just to sort of reiterate, even with the discretion now, then that inserts a whole other host of problems in terms of how, as Senator Barrow already asked, how is this going to be determined? How are physicians going to decide when they do and do not, take somebody's blood without their consent? So that's going to lead to discriminatory enforcement and bias. And the parts of the bill that are most concerning are the criminalization aspects of it, and the parts that allow for referrals to Child Protective Services. Nothing in the bill says that these results are prohibited from being sent to Child Protective Services or cannot be used against somebody in criminalization. So if those parts of the bill were taken out, it would improve the bill quite a bit. But the way it is now, all of those risks are still there. And then compounding that, you have other problems with the language in terms of things like obstetrical complications being like a phrase that is vague and as not something that can be appropriately assessed. It's not like a medical term. In fact, the phrase obstetrical complication is not defined anywhere in the Louisiana Code. The scope of obstetrical...
Where you at, Ms. Schilling? Where you at?
Sure.
Where you at on the bill?
The obstetrical complications.
Okay. Okay.
It's a vague term that isn't defined in the bill and doesn't have like a defined medical meaning either. And so, again, back to, how is this going to be determined? Then the scope of obstetrical complications could feasibly include a whole host of, usual progressions through pregnancy. Anything that is like not just the most common and mundane,
Yes.
Start to finish with giving birth could be deemed an obstetrical
Ms. Schilling, that's why I asked the question. That part is taken out.
Oh, okay.
All right. After on line 5, after action, the rest of the line was taken out.
Okay, I haven't actually foreseen the amendments.
I know, but I just wanted to...
basing it on the description of it.
Yeah, I didn't want to cut you short, but
no,
just so the committee would
That's good
see
to know.
that.
Well, I don't know what it's been replaced with.
It just has been taken out totally.
Okay, all right.
After the word action, it's off.
I think that is an improvement because that language, again, was vague, but still there's no, that I have seen at least, there's no real guidance in this bill for how these determinations are going to be made. They could lead to really drastic results for patients and families. There's, some constitutionality problems with the bill as well. And then also actually to the points being made before about who's going to pay for this, there's potentially a significant cost issue here with who's going to pay for these drug tests. A 1994 cost estimate in New York for something that was sort of similar to this but would have required urine drug screens. They estimated that it would cost the state $26.1 million a year to perform those tests. So in this context, I guess we don't know how often physicians are going to opt to do it, but it could be a significant cost, and without really getting much effective information. It's a very invasive test, of course, having your blood taken without your consent, but it's this very short window in time that it gives you any information anyway. So it's not an effective way of screening for the problem that the bill is trying to address.
Very
So I'm
good.
going to.
We have a few
Yeah.
questions. So the board has a few questions. Madam Pro Tem, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And either lady, I appreciate you sharing what you're sharing. My district is incredibly suffering from the very thing that I think Senator Kathy's trying to remedy in this bill. We've worked hard to implement the MAT program for pregnant women to encourage them to come in, but these are the obstacles I think we've got. When I ask an OBGYN office if they would put up information in their waiting room in a very passive way, so a pregnant woman who may be thinking, I need help with my drug problem, they'll say, oh, my pregnant women don't want to see that in the waiting room. They don't want to think they're sitting next to someone who may need that. Mm-hmm. So there's this awkwardness about that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that at the facility that delivers, the only place that delivers babies in Washington Parish, they're more likely to have visitors come in to see the pregnant woman or the new baby using drugs and sharing drugs in the hallway or in the patient's room than even if the mother's addressed it herself. So I think there's layers of issues with this that concern me. But I think you've made some interesting points in that I think women are so used to being kind of picked on that we don't even see how obviously this is. I would love to think that someone comes in the ER and they've fallen off something. They're gonna, oh well, maybe you were. There's so many opportunities that we could think that there was a drug issue in the thing. I know the difference is we have an infant we're protecting here. Mm-hmm. My hospital works really hard on that, but I'm conflicted, and so I appreciate what you said. I think
one
there's
thing
so
to-
many layers to this.
Yeah. I think one thing to point out, and I think actually you can probably speak to this more than me, but the sort of like the leading medical groups on this issue, like ACOG and what's the Society for Addictive Medicine. Yeah. They recommend doing screenings that are basically like questionnaires with patients to get information from them at different points in pregnancy, and that's the most effective tool for assessing whether there might be a substance abuse issue, and then getting people resources because it's in a more sort of like trusting way, and it's not this tiny window of time like with a blood test. So I think that's another issue, a policy issue with the bill, that I don't think that the testing that's being done is, as I said, is invasive, and I don't think that it's actually really providing the information that that would be useful in this context, or there is a better way to do it.
I think that, we all have an idea of how this is happening, but if, Mr. Chairman, if we had somebody here with a hospital or a program that actually offers a MAT treatment for pregnant women, I'd like to know what we're currently doing.
Sure. We have a lot of folks with expertise in the hospital arena. If anybody can kind of give us what's presently happening or what you see the trends going, if anybody, I know Mr. Waddell has just a ton of knowledge.
Yeah.
And he's not
moving
shy
an
to
inch.
speak whatsoever. And I know he wants to earn his keep with the Hospital Association. He's not shy, for sure. Wouldn't y'all agree?
Yes.
Mr. Waddell, we'd love to get your fountain of information.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Greg Waddell with the Louisiana Hospital Association. I do not know the MAT. I can't give you any insight on that. Probably give me about 20 minutes, and I'm sure my phone's about to explode, and I'll be able to come back up here and tell you everything you want to know. But I just don't have any. It's not something I've dealt with recently.
Because I know there are situations right now where a pregnant mother comes in with an abuse problem. She's put into a program even or before, and then through delivery, that whole situation is made aware to the labor delivery.
I know Women's Hospital here in Baton Rouge has
I've been
a very
texting
robust program. I think it's the Grace program. I mean, I hope I'm
Yeah,
it's
it
just
is. Yeah.
completely
It's a
off
I've
Grace
been
the.
texting on that. They're at a conference.
So-
They're not here today.
And it's voluntary.
But they have a,
Yes.
it's been a
requires
very
consent.
successful program, and that's something that the hospital has really put a lot of resources
But is
behind.
it all initiated by the mother during her pregnancy, or is there some point at the delivery time that the hospital intercedes and puts the mother on that path?
I think it's probably even
aggressive?
before that. I think it's probably when those physicians, those
Ideally,
obstetricians,
yeah.
I think the idea is that you want to identify this well before we get to the point of delivery. I mean, that's the optimal, in the situation. We're really late in the game if we're waiting at the point of delivery to, maybe that's the case. I mean, that's
think
maybe
it
how it.
sometimes is
But
the case,
but
yeah.
certainly that's the Frankie.
I'm so
sure
happy
you can-
we're agreeing on this. We're sitting together.
Oh, he's an agreeable guy.
We agree on this.
Yeah,
There are many touch points, okay?
man, it's tough today.
And I'm an agreeable gal, Senator Mills.
We gotta laugh a little bit, Joe.
We do. But, with this being a serious matter, as Mr. Waddell said, there are so many touch points before this. There's another bill that we have a tremendous amount of support for, which is a maternal mental health screening. We know that mental health and substance abuse are intertwined to some degree. Research has shown that. There are so many touch points to help a mom before we get into crisis mode that our state could be doing that we are not doing. And as Mr. Waddell just said, at this point, and not to misquote you, the way I perceive the comment is that there's other things that we can do ahead of this. We are late in the game if we are providing services to a mom while she is in delivery at a vulnerable state, at a very stressful state, as it is, giving birth. And the trauma that could be associated with this. It's just, I don't think that we really see the real impact it could have to that mom and to families. And then that baby. March of Dimes supports a mom and baby dyad, which is keeping moms and babies together. Whether or not that mom has a substance use issue or not, there is healing and things that are needed from that mom for that baby to help them cope and survive, especially if they have NAS. They still need that mom, and they still need to be safe. And we can back this up and screen people for mental health disorders. We can screen them for substance use. If we want to mandate something, and for the first time agree on a shall and not a may, we can mandate universal screening for substance use disorder when the mom is pregnant to help them, and then also increase the services that are available for people who are experiencing substance abuse. I've heard one program, Grace program. Why aren't there more? And that's here in Baton Rouge. So we really need to make sure that those resources are available. Senator Mizell has done a great job with recognizing that MAT treatment needs to be available in some settings that it's not. But unfortunately, this bill is not the answer. But thank you.
Just one other quick point along these lines too is that some of the same medical groups that I was talking about before, like ACOG and actually also with HHS, they warn about false positive tests in this context, which obviously then can have really dramatic implications, as Frankie was saying, for a family. And so HHS recommends then that because of the risk of false positives, that there be follow-up testing or something to confirm it. And the bill doesn't even seem to contemplate that, let alone require it. So there's just a lot of there's a lot of room for bias and discriminatory enforcement, as we've discussed, and then erroneous results also with a test that's invasive and may not be giving you really the data that would be what you would want.
No, thank you,
Good.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and just a note, and if anybody from LDH, from what Senator Mizell talked about, I know in the region that I live in, Region 4, Dr. Stefanski had a series of meetings with the DAs, with the sheriffs, with law enforcement, with different agencies to be proactive to make sure that if a pregnant lady did need treatment, that law enforcement was not locking people up, but it was very, very proactive to have an outreach within our community. And it was, we had judges, DAs, sheriffs there, and it seemed like it was a good outreach. I'm not sure if they're doing that in other regions, but ours did. On that note, it's yours, Senator Barrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Waddell, good to see you again. Every time I see you, I think about your dad. But you know, you brought up the GRACE program, and immediately when I saw this bill, that's the first thing I thought about, because it is a awesome program. I have been there. I've heard the testimonies of the women, and so they build a relationship with the women where they feel comfortable. And one of the women gave such an impactful testimony because her pregnancy was out of trauma. But as a result of getting the help, being walked along this pathway, she didn't give her baby up. She kept her baby, and they both were made healthy and whole. What gives me a lot of pause and concern, Attorney Schilling, that you brought up is the process that may be used. While I can appreciate it being changed from shall to may, it makes me wonder who would be the may.
Yes.
And how would that be decided on? And then the other part of it that gave me a little concern was within 8 hours. So I know that after having a child, depending on your pregnancy, like mine's were not as smooth as some, I was out.
Yes.
I remember being out with my first child for like 12 hours because my epidural went very wrong. So it's a miracle that I'm even sitting here. But
That's some real big consent problems.
right. So then I wonder how that would work. So I mean, if they decide that they thought, you know, if this was in law when I had my child, and because it went wrong, then they may have thought, well, maybe something's wrong with her. But I would not have been coherent because, again, the epidural went very wrong. So that gives me concern in terms of the time frame. And then how will the decision be made to see who would actually be screened? Ms. Robertson, I know that you're always around, you're always consulting us, you're always talking with us about the various bills, and I know that we're rated by the March of Dimes as a F as it relates to child maternal health. Have y'all worked with the author? I see what he's trying to do, and at the end of the day, I think that, you know, in terms of trying to make sure that the mom and the baby are healthy. Have y'all been able to talk with him to try to see if there's some way that we can come to some resolution with the bill?
Unfortunately, we haven't. We have reached out respectfully, repeatedly, from the filing date of the bill up
Okay.
until just a few weeks ago. And for whatever reason, I'm not saying it's intentional,
Okay.
but we have not been successful in trying to collaborate and discuss our concerns about the legislation. But we definitely would like the opportunity to still speak because we do still have concerns. And if I could say one more thing, too, about this is that, you know, there are folks sitting here and there are people in the audience who either prepare to speak or are submitting a card, but there's a lot of people who are in opposition to this bill who couldn't be here. The New Orleans Maternal Child Health Coalition mobilized its maternal health advocates, and as of a few minutes ago, there should have been over 351 letters sent to this committee between yesterday when we got notice that the bill would be here and today. And if we had more notice, we would have had more advocates here, and we certainly would have had more people have an opportunity to voice their opinion. But 351 in less than 24 hours, that says a lot.
You're
That's
100%
just from that
right.
one
I
coalition.
do have a large series of emails that I'm not going to read them all, but there is emails from the New Orleans Maternal and Child Coalition. So you just to reinforce what you said.
So, just one last question, Mr.
Take your time.
As I heard you list, I think, a couple of things that you see can be like solutions. Can you just share those again with us? Because that's at the end of the day, I think that's what we're looking for, right? We're looking for how we can make it better. Because my fear is, if we put this out here and women begin to see that, you know, if I show up, then, I'm not going to go for any of my basic checkups, period, right? So I'm just going to go maybe when it's time to deliver. But then if I'm afraid that they may do a sampling of my blood and I know what the issue is, then I may not show up. And then what happens then?
I think one of the additional points to raise is that just looking at the mental health of the mom in the postpartum period and what additional trauma you're inflicting on that mom, and looking at suicide rates and other vulnerabilities that are already there in a perfect scenario for someone who is not experiencing psychosocial issues or any other issues related to substance use disorder, and what type of trauma we're inflicting upon that mom. It's in terms of solutions, I'll share again from the March of Dimes policies and programs to address drug-exposed newborns. March of Dimes supports initiatives aimed at providing care for mother and baby. For one, access to comprehensive services. Again, we mentioned one. Where's the funding for providing additional access to services to support moms throughout the state? Priority access to flexible treatment, immunity during prenatal visits, provider education. Senator Mizell mentioned about obstetrics providers, perhaps you mentioned in your community, not being amenable to providing information, saying moms don't want to see that. Well, what responsibility might lie in the education? So one, not only educating the moms, but it sounds like the providers need some education and their responsibility and onus to the well-being of their patient and the child in utero. And why is it that there's a stigma associated with providers for even discussing this? So universal screening, which has been recommended in the state pregnancy-associated maternal mortality report, which is the state maternal death report, clearly says we recommend universal screening. That means screen everyone. And then that also hopefully removes the opportunity for bias if you're screening everyone, and that patient-provider care trust is important as well. So screening is important. There's opportunities to screen moms before we get in labor and delivery and in crisis mode when there's an issue like that.
And then the last point I will raise that you brought up, I think, Attorney Schilling's regarding a cost. Certainly, I think there would be additional cost to the Department of Children and Family Services because already I think they have the wherewithal now to be able to do that. But if there is going to be this random testing that's done, then that then puts them more on guard, and then having them making this decision whether or not the child needs to be taken out of this environment. And there's no fiscal note attached to this. And so I think that there will be, I don't know if we need to ask the Department of Children and Family Services to come and talk about what that process looks like now and what this bill would do if this bill is enacted, what would that look like and what would be the impact to the Department of Children and Family Services, which has been hit also quite much financially, or quite hard financially.
If I could just add real quickly in terms of if we're trying to, improve the bill or come up with a better solution, I would just reiterate that I think that the threat of criminalization has to come out.
Yeah.
And the portion that says that, this doesn't require a report about
Thank you.
child abuse, that it should prohibit a report of child abuse or criminalization. So
And
it's
that's
not-
what the GRACE program does, right? So the women don't fear that. It's no fear of that.
Correct.
What they receive is totally opposite. Love, care, no judgment, and then the assistance to
Because
help
if
them
you're
become
told
clean
this,
and sober.
that might happen,
Yeah.
you might be prosecuted, then, it will certainly dissuade a lot of people from seeking appropriate.
Thank you for adding that.
Thank you, guys.
Yes.